So, welcome back to the course on smart energy distribution. I hope that today there are no technical problems. Meanwhile, we found out that the problems we had with the communication between the laptop and the data projector was the adapter from VGA to the laptop internal protocol. And now I have a different adapter, and this is supposed to be much more stable. So if you run into problems like that, we had that with several of the new laptops, it was the adapter, not the data projector, not other things. And I hope that now today it will be stable. Okay, so let's look at what we had done in the last lectures. We had looked at all kinds of things. I'd shown you quite a few things about the energy distribution, some basic information which most of you know about the primary energy consumption, development over the years, electricity generation, showing that that is really increasing. Meanwhile, showed you something about the surplus that we have in energy generation. Then we looked at different types of power generation plants. There was this diagram here. I showed you some examples of power generation from renewable sources, photovoltaic, solar heat. Made this brief view again on different types of power generation from renewables. Looked at wind power. Showed you something about biomass, the Biolic process. I showed you something about the need for flexibility and the fraction or the need for energy beyond the power generation from renewables. We looked at then at power transmission and distribution, gave you a view on the networks. We talked about different views of those networks. We talked about the different voltage levels, about AC versus DC, and then I started to tell you something about logical structures. We noticed that there are balancing zones and balancing groups, that we have 4 balancing zones in Germany, and we talked about primary, secondary, and minute control, different ways of responding to fluctuations in the frequency. I showed you this slide where I had recorded fluctuations in frequency over a few minutes. That was this day, the 8th of May, where we had very negative prices. That was more information on balancing power, and then that was virtual power plants, and that was, I think, the last slide we had last time. So this is really not a new slide, but it's just showing it the typical price development for balancing power. It's quite a few years ago. Meanwhile, it looks very different. I told you something about, yes, we have seen this already. I told you something about market structures, about the long-term markets where we talk about futures and options, about buying or selling energy for several months ahead of time. And then I also showed you some price developments. I think I've shown you these price developments on the day-ahead market, on different days, on the spot market. I've shown you that also already. And the first thing I have to tell you today is, I think, the definition of merit order. That is the first new slide. Now, merit order is something which those in a program or study related to economics probably know. So merit order is a specific way of allocating orders based on the currently present bits. So you have a certain resource that you would like to fill. You have certain, like here you have the price, here you have the resource that you would like to get, and you have certain offers, and they come at different prices, and you just list them here with increasing prices, and then you know up to which point you have to go, and if you have to get that much resource, then you have an ordered allocation of the bits, and so all those who are smaller than the bit where you had met your demand, those are in the pool. And then the second question is what price actually they all get. There are different values for that. So this more or less is stated here. So the bits refer in this case of the energy markets to a certain amount of energy, for example, for a specific hour of the following day on the day ahead market. And then the orders are assigned, starting with the lowest price until the predicted demand can be satisfied. This is the decision who actually gets into the pool. And then the question is, what do they actually get paid? And on the day ahead market, the final price is determined, or on those energy markets, the final price is determined by the last bit that gets selected. It means that all of them get the final price. There are some other schemes where you have merit order decisions on whether they get into the pool, and then they might get paid exactly what they had asked for in their bid. But there are other, like on the day-ahead market, it runs such that the final price is determined by the last bid that gets selected, so that they all get the same price if they are in the pool. So that means that the price of electric power for a specific hour is determined by the most expensive power plant that is needed to satisfy the demand. And that means even if you offer power at a very low price, you get paid the high price. And that certainly is something which is of interest. And so on the next slide, I have a few diagrams for that. And merit order is one of the standard ways of assigning of allocating bids to the market, and so this is used in many different situations. Now, again, what does it mean? If you have this merit order, you know that you have here the this actually is oh, just notice that I have German annotation there. So this is the ordered list of bids that you have. That's the amount of power you have to, the amount of power or energy that you need. And then it's listed in increasing order. And in reality, usually you have certain sources of power which are always in the pool. That's the renewable energies, and then you have all the others. And so the problem is if the renewables get a larger share in that scheme, then this is all moved to the right. And so it means that if, for example, before, if you don't have those renewable energies, you might have needed the more expensive energy as the final amount that you need to satisfy your demand, and then you would have had that price, and now because of the renewables, it's reduced significantly, and so the price goes down, because you don't need those expensive power generators anymore. And obviously it means that the expensive power generators are usually not getting allocated anything. And so the design of the market usually has been like that in the peak demand periods. There were the typical peak demands in the morning, in the evening, partially around noon. Then the demand or the market was set up in a way such that there's always a very expensive power plant in the end which had to be used at the peak demand periods. And so the price for the peak demand periods significantly went up because of the expensive power plants, gas power plants, for example. Now, if the expensive power plants are not used anymore, the price does not get that high. And so we get lower prices. And it means that all those who sell power for a lower price or could sell it for a lower price have fewer times where they get paid more than that they actually asked for. And so the revenue situation for the energy providers really changed significantly because of that renewable energy effect, moving down the final price that is the result of those bids for, or these offers for providing power, and it's just that the very expensive power generators don't get to supply power anymore. Okay, so this is an important effect, and certainly, like if you look at this line here, this line is not straight. This line goes a little bit to the left. This shall indicate that if you have to use higher prices, then usually the demand goes down. So the higher the price gets, the more the demand goes down. That means the effect is that you need, or that your demand is reduced if you have higher prices. And so this is not a straight line. Yeah? If you would have a fixed demand, this line would be straight always. But if the demand goes down, and you assume that the demand goes down, if the price is too much increasing, then you have something like this as a line. And so the demand line then is bending over to the left there. Okay, that's the definition of merit order, very important method for allocating orders on the market. And if we look at the development of market prices, then like this is showing the price development until July 13. Now, this meanwhile, or this tendency has been going on. I could have replaced this with a newer slide, but it would show the same tendency. Here what we see is the development of the market prices in on the European Energy Exchange. That's the energy exchange for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Then there's North Pool, and there's the Amsterdam Power Exchange. So 3 different markets. You see the North Pool has lower prices than originally the EEX had, but the EEX price really is going down, and this is the effect of more renewables in the market and of a quite significant surplus of power generation. So we have significant surplus, and this price is going down more and more. So now we are more in the range of 30 euro per megawatt hour, and it used to be in the range of, as you can see here, this was the more or less stable situation around or between 50, 60 euros per megawatt hour, which means 5 to 6 cents per kilowatt hours. And now it's going down to around 3 cents. And this is going even further down. So energy is getting cheaper. The problem is that the break-even point for those who generate power is somewhere in this range here. And so the prices that you can get for the power that you generate with your power plants, the prices are below your cost that you have for generating the power. That's the current situation, that you can't make a profit if you sell power on those typical markets here. And this is something which is certainly worrying the utility companies, the energy providers, power plant operators, that they cannot sell the power at a price where they can make a profit. And on this slide, I would like to show you now something which I actually got from Johann Söderbohm, who used to work with Vattenfall. He was in the research division of Vattenfall. He's meanwhile in a research institute in Sweden, and I'm teaching a course together with him at the Hector School. And he provided this slide where you can see the following. You can see the development of the prices for different technologies. So if you have the question, where should I invest if I would like to start building a new power plant? What would be the technology where I should invest? I would only invest in technology in the moment where I have some option or some assumption that I will make profit at some time. And now here on this diagram, in the top diagram here, what you see is something like in yellow. This is the line, optimistic line of the wholesale market price for energy. You have just seen on the previous slide that this price is going down. Here it's just like indicated just a little bit below 50. At the moment it is more in the range of 30, so the situation is even worse. And you can see for all the different technologies, for nuclear, for coal, for lignite, for gas, for onshore wind, offshore wind, it's all more expensive than what you can get on the market. And so if you are an investor, you would not invest in power generation. In power generation, where you have to sell the power on the wholesale market, you cannot make a profit. In Britain, they have a nice idea about how to make sure that people invest. They said for nuclear power, in Britain, they get 120 euros per megawatt hour, guaranteed for a period of 30 years. Then they can make a profit. But this is complete subsidy for the industry that is building nuclear power plants. And it's done because they want to have nuclear power plants. They are not economical. They're much too expensive. And this, like 50 euros, is even a low price, low investment price, not taking into account all the prices, all the costs that are associated with that. So just a side remark on what you might have read recently in the newspapers, that the European Commission has decided a new investment program, or is suggesting a new investment program in nuclear power. This has nothing to do with something which is economically reasonable, because it is much too expensive. Yeah? And you see, in Britain, they have a way around that. They just pay them more than what the price on the market is. It has always been an argument against the renewable energies that they will never generate power at a market price. And you see, wind, onshore wind is less expensive than offshore wind, definitely. But you know that offshore wind, you have all the problems of building the offshore wind power plants, and then you have to transport the power from the offshore wind parks to the country. Much more expensive, but this is also an option for the industry, which they like, because then they don't have to change the structure of the energy system. It's just replacing central power plants, and it's renewable. But it has, again, it is not a situation, or it would not be a decision to go for offshore wind plants if you just look at ways how you can make profit, because it's more expensive. And you know that there are extra fees that have to be paid, extra additional fees on the price the consumer has to pay for the extra costs that are associated with offshore wind plants. So what we definitely see is that it is a problem. It is a problem to decide where to invest. And now you see something more here. You see something on the right-hand side. then you see decentralized power generation. That means power generation at decentralized locations where you don't sell power for the wholesale market price, but for the retail price. That is the price you have to compare with. Like the end consumer, that's power for the end consumer. Now the price for electricity for the end consumer is, like here is even quite low price. Meanwhile, it's rather going close to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And so there you have a price. If you generate power at a decentral location close to the end consumer, and you can sell the power directly to the end consumer will compare the price to the price that he has to pay on the retail market to the power provider, and that's around 28 cents. Now the cost for power generation here is indicated with something like 150, so 15 or 17 cents per kilowatt hour. Meanwhile, we are far below, we are rather around 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And it means there is quite a gap, or quite some gap here in between. And this gap is the potential margin that you can have if you invest in decentralized power generation. You don't have to pay, or like you don't have to pay yourself for the grid fees. You have to compare it to the retail price, and if you have power generation prices of 10 to 15 cents, you can make money by selling power directly to the end consumer. And that's why most utility companies are investing in services and technology for decentralized power generation. That's where they see possibilities to earn something, whereas with centralized power plants, they cannot make money anymore. Okay, then we have another indication here, or another price for a technology where you combine battery or photovoltaic with battery. That makes it more expensive. This was based on the prices in 2014, 2 years ago. Meanwhile, the prices go down. So here is an estimation of Johann Söderbohm for the prices in 2020. So he was optimistic with respect to the wholesale market, that it stays just a little bit below 50 euro per megawatt hour. May well be that it will go down even further. The prices for the technologies here are assumed to go down slightly also, so this does not change very much for the like here, the nuclear stays the same. Coal, lignite, gas go slightly up in prices. Onshore, offshore wind power plants will go slightly down in their prices, and PV will go down. There are actually some predictions that photovoltaic cell or power from photovoltaic cells will be down to something like 5 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Investment costs, and like if you consider the investment costs, what kind of price do you get then as a result? So this would even be almost reasonable for selling power on the wholesale market. And if you look at PV plus battery, here the assumption is that it's still slightly below 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Predictions are that it will be somewhere in this range, actually. So it means that with PV and with PV plus battery, you have quite some extra margins for making money. So if you are investing in new technologies and want to make money on the future energy markets, assuming that there won't be dramatic changes in regulation which make this unattractive. There have been some attempts to make this more unattractive by, for example, requiring that all the power that is generated locally must also, or if you consume that, you have to pay for the grid fee or for the EEG fee anyway. It would be the same, like extra taxes on consuming power you generate locally, would be similar to a situation where you grow cabbage on your garden, and if you eat the cabbage yourself, you have to pay tax on it because the farmers on the market cannot sell the cabbage anymore. Yeah, so this is a strange situation, but it is a market certainly which is very important for the society, for economy and society. We need stable energy supply, so somehow we have to finance that. But it's obvious that there will be advantages to look at the decentralized power generation just by looking at this price and investment situation. Okay, so this is, yeah? Is that regulation currently happening? It happened 2 years ago. There was a change in laws that if you have a large power or PV cell or large PV cells on your house, more than 10 kilowatt peak, you have to pay the EEG fee. Yeah, so that is something which happens already. And this is something which is done because it's not in the interest of the energy industry that there are decentralized possibilities to generate power and consume power without them getting involved in that. You know, this has to do with how you want to organize your society and your industry. And if you have a centralized energy system, you have a structure which is always involved in whatever energy is consumed somewhere. There's a way of raising money and paying for the energy, certainly paying for the cost of the system, but also generating money. And for example, RWE, one of the largest utility companies, is a company where many of the cities, the municipalities in North Rhine-Westphalia have large shares of that utility company, and so the annual revenue that they get, the annual dividend, is a significant part of their local budgets. Now, if you know that you are moving into a situation where these large utility companies cannot make money anymore, this is not in the interest of the local politicians. And so they will do everything they can to prevent that. Yeah, that's why certain decisions are made such that this development will not come too soon. Yeah, this is a problem with the whole topic of this energy transition. There would be a technological roadmap for that. But the technological roadmap to get closer to the situation where we have a really large degree of power generation from renewables, this technological roadmap is associated with certain economical roadmaps. And if the business opportunities are against the interests of people who are important, then the economic roadmap will be different from the technological roadmap. And certain things might just get prevented, or it may take longer to get there. Yeah, okay. But I'm not here to tell you something about politics, but about technology. Nevertheless, it is important to know what the implications are of the technologies that we are developing. Okay. So, one should at least have these situations in mind here. Yes?
Why is it expected for the end consumer price to grow?
That's because the fees for, like the grid fees, will grow. The fees for the end consumer will increase. That's the typical, like, this is an assumption that it will be increased more and more. In particular, if assume there are less people, fewer and fewer people, who actually get power from the grid. There are there are certain costs associated with maintaining the grid, the power grid, and these costs have to be covered by some people or by some income. And so if the grid needs more money, the grid fee will go up. Yeah. So this certainly, like this is the development we have seen over the last years, that the prices for all these overhead, these parts of the power price that are grid fee and EEG fee and taxes and so on, that has all been growing in recent years. If that is changed, if that goes down, the price won't get up that much. Yeah, but the current assumption is that the price would rather stay around 30 cents per kilowatt hour or even might go beyond that. But it may, like if we are lucky, the price will rather go down. But if you see at this, or if you look at this situation here with all the investments, like if the price goes, or if the price for new power plants all are higher than what they can make on the wholesale market, maybe the prices just have to go up. Yeah, that this development on the power exchange markets might be reversed in some time, that the wholesale market price also goes up. I don't know exactly, but this is just, like even if we assume that the price stays the same, around 28 cents per kilowatt hour, there's still a significant margin for the decentralized situation compared to a deficit situation that you have for the centralized scenarios. Okay, I wanted to tell you something about the development of electricity prices for the different customers. So this is the average power price for a household in cent per kilowatt hours. You see that for a period from 1998 to 2016, to this year. What you see, so here actually you see something which is contradicting what I just said, that we assume the price is increasing. Here actually we see a slight decrease in prices from 29.14 down to 28.69. And you see that the basic price is, what is this? The Beschaffung, Netzentgelt, Vertrieb. Beschaffung, Vertrieb. Okay, so the price for power, for just the power price, is this dark area here, 6 cents on the market. The current, that's the average price that is calculated in the price for a household. And then you have here something that is the grid fee. That's the grid fee. Then you have some other parts. You have Mehrwertsteuer, value-added tax. You have the EEG fee, that is this part here. That's EEG. And then you have some other fee there. Somewhere there must be tax. I don't see that. But it should be all in there. So there are some more things included in there. Yeah, so it's a rather complex price that we have to pay. And certainly the tendency here is that it's been going up. And but it has always been going up. And now, like in 2011, we had the energy transition decision. Here we have a price increase, and now it's more or less stable. Yeah, so I don't know how that will develop. And another interesting graph is this one for like prices for the industry. Now, industry has special prices. So the industry price is, like the average industry price 2015, 2016 was around almost 14 cents, half the price that households have to pay. And it has been more or less stable, similar to what we have seen for the household price. So it has been going up a little bit, but not that much. And what you can see here is that the price here went up slightly, and then the price got significantly down. And that's the price for buying the energy on the wholesale market. And if you are lucky, or like if you are having an industry or a factory which is very energy intensive, then you don't have to pay the EEG fee. The EEG fee is this part here. So if you look at the price that you have to pay without EEG, that price has been going down significantly. And now if you remember what you see in the media about the statements of the industry with respect to the effects of the German power or energy policy or politics. They say that the dramatically increasing prices for power will make many industries move out of Germany because in other countries they will get energy at much lower prices than in Germany. As we all know, power prices are just soaring. And the truth is, the industry that is power intensive usually does not have to pay the EEG fee, and they have, as a result of the energy transition, they have decreasing prices. So they are getting benefits from the energy transition. But since for most of the people who live in households, they just see their own power bill, they say, okay, you are right, it's a very dangerous situation, we all have to pay more for the power, it's a bad policy. Yeah? But it is a very good policy for the large industry who has to pay, or who does not have to pay, the EEG fee. Yes? Sorry? I don't know. I don't know what happened there. This is actually strange that the price here in that year really went up. I have no idea what the reason for that is. But it's a good question. Okay. There are more slides around that, or for that. So here, this is a comparison for electricity prices for the year 2013, where the red bar here is for Germany. And this is for just prices taking also into account the EEG. And if you reduce the price for EEG in 2013, then it would be somewhere around here. So in a very average situation, only few countries who would offer lower prices for the energy, for the industry. Certainly, if you look at all those companies who have to pay the EEG fee, they have higher prices than in other countries. But as I said, the energy-intensive companies, that's what the regulation certainly currently is. They get they get exempted from having to pay the EEG fee, and so they have a benefit. Okay. So, summary of this overview of energy generation and distribution. Obviously, electric transmission and distribution networks are quite complex systems. There are many different, very heterogeneous components. We have the different voltage layers. We have the necessity to provide stability. We can do that with all these reserve power devices. We have the primary control, secondary control, minute reserve, and hour reserve. So this is a very important part. We have this effect of the increase of power generation from renewables, which leads to higher fluctuations. It also leads to decentralization and uncertainty. You know all that. We have a strong need for new approaches to management and control of the power grid. You also need that. We have to replace large rotating masses. Large rotating masses are important for providing initial stability and reducing or slowing down changes in the frequency. Like so far they stabilize the grid. We have to look for new components and decentralized systems to provide similar services. And as again, like I state that again and again, we need this energy information grid with distributed intelligence to cope with the changes that we have that are obvious now in the development of the grids. Okay, so this was this chapter on energy distribution, and now I will continue with a chapter on self-organized balancing power. I think I have to take this one. No, it can take this one. So let's go into that. No, not smart home, that is wrong. That comes afterwards. Number 3. So now we go to slide number 1. And I want to tell you an approach how we can actually try to replace services that are so far offered in a centralized way in a very decentralized way. And we come back to the problem of balancing power and how we can actually provide balancing power. So again, just to repeat that, we have these logical structures. We know that we need a steady balance between demand and supply. We know these traditional assumptions that demand cannot be controlled, electricity cannot be stored, and so that in the traditional power management, we have to make sure that there's always exactly the needed supply of electric power, and this can be seen if we just look at the frequency, because imbalances between a demand and supply lead to changes in frequency. And so we have this frequency control scheme, the primary, secondary, and tertiary control power. Okay, now we have this structure with the balancing zones, balancing groups, and I would like to now go into the balancing groups and see what their task actually is. And as I said, the balancing groups, they have balancing group managers, and the balancing group managers, they have to make a forecast for the consumption for the next day and of the production for the next day. And so they can make, they provide the information that is necessary to buy and sell power on the day-ahead market, on the spot market. Now, the balancing group manager may be very accurate, and then the next day they will have exactly the power that is needed. But like usually, there are some imbalances. Now, if the imbalances are very large, maybe the balancing group manager has made a wrong forecast. So if there are imbalances, the balancing groups are charged for the imbalances, because on the balancing zone, you must have a complete balance between demand and supply. The problem is that the settlement, like the allocation of costs, or this charging for imbalances, is done at the end of the day, and so you don't know exactly what you will have to pay for the next day. What does this mean? If we have a balancing zone, assume this is the balancing zone, and we have all kinds of balancing groups. Now you are charged for imbalances. Maybe that you have a situation where the balancing zone has a deficit in power. Now there is this balancing group here, which has a surplus. So having this surplus, it's also an imbalance inside that balancing group, but it will reduce the deficit of the balancing zone. So if you have, in this case, you have a surplus in the balancing group, and you have a deficit in the balancing zone. So you get compensated for energy. You get paid for that extra energy that you don't need locally and that can be used to reduce the imbalance between demand and supply. Now, all the others notice that and try to get a surplus of power, and the next day they all have a surplus. The balancing group has a surplus of power, and this clever balancing group here has a deficit the next day. And since it has a deficit, it is reducing the imbalance in the balancing group, or in the balancing zone. By needing more power, the others have a surplus, so this small balancing group here can contribute to reducing the surplus. And so here you have a deficit in the balancing group, you have a surplus in the balancing zone, so you're not charged for that and even might get compensated for that. So if you are this clever balancing group manager, on both days he would have made money, and the others would have to pay every day. Yeah, but this just indicates that it's difficult to know during the day whether it is positive or negative to have deficit or surplus of power in your balancing group. So the best thing you can do is make a very accurate estimate and reduce the need for extra power, because if you don't have a surplus or a deficit, you don't have to pay. If it's exactly like if your demand is exactly the supply that you have ordered, then you don't have to pay for any deviations. You don't get compensated, but you also don't have to pay. And so this would be something which is of interest to reduce the imbalance that you have in a balancing group. Now, you could look at what is the reason for the forecast error that you can have. Different causes for that. You might have a change in consumption. People just consume more or less than was assumed. You might have a change in production, like certain factories have different production schedules. You might have bottlenecks in the network, or maybe like one point is missing here. Weather certainly is also a cause. If you have a change in weather, you have different power generation. We know about that. And the implications certainly are that you have increased or decreased frequency, you have increased or decreased voltage locally, and so rotation speed of generators would be modified by this different frequency. And if you have changing frequency or changing rotation speed, this can lead to damage in the devices that you are, like in those rotating generators, can lead to damages in power plants. So that's bad, technologically bad. If you have deviations in frequency, you should not have that. We know that we try to maintain always 50 hertz. Okay. So we know that there's a market for balancing power. I don't have to go into like this is just this one quite old diagram just to show the fluctuating prices there, and so some stakeholders just try to get additional profit by providing balancing power. This is quite a market which is of interest. And we know that there are companies like Next or Lichtblick, and the industry is also working on that to provide balancing power and make money. This is quite a large market, meanwhile, to provide balancing power, primary, secondary, and so on. Now, here we just have seen prices for balancing power. Now the idea is, if like prices will usually provide an incentive to use or not to use power. And so there have been projects, there have been all kinds of settings where people say we have to provide time-varying prices for energy. So we assume that we can influence customers via price signals. Here you see an example of hourly varying prices. And like this is the device that was used in the project Meregio, where we indicated the price, or ELBW indicates the prices in 3 different colors: green for low price, yellow for intermediate prices, red for high prices. And on this device you could see the current price indicated in yellow in this situation. You could also see the price during the day, the price development. And so you had information and could use that to influence your, or this should influence you in using your devices at home. So the assumption is if people see that, they will get aware of their energy consumption, and they might reduce their energy consumption because they see how much they are actually consuming. This will result in some energy saving, but the main point is that it will lead to a load change, to flexibility, and you know the flexibility is important. And if I go to low price periods, I will have reduced costs. And this has been tested in several settings, and in particular in the Meregio project, we have tested that with 1,000 customers, and they were confronted with different prices at all the different times of the day in order to study to what extent they would modify their energy usage depending on the price level that they can see. That's why you see here green and red curves, the green curve for the lowest price, the red curve for the highest price, and you see the change in the load compared to some reference group which was measured beforehand. So that's a group of people who don't have these devices, these incentives. And then what is interesting is that this ability, or this willingness to modify the load is varying during the day. And you see that, for example, very strange, at 4 in the morning, very strange, there is an increase in power, like 5% more. I have no idea why that happens. Cannot happen because of some human response, must be some other reason. But then here you have, in the morning times, you see that, well, for red prices, the load goes down. For green prices, also the load goes down. So here they just see what they are consuming, and they are reducing their energy consumption. And then you have this part here where you have the green curve, where you have up to 25% here at, this is different in winter and summer. In summer, around 3 p.m., more than 27% load increase, measured in that, like in households of test customers. And in the opposite, for the red curve, you have decrease in power in the morning, 10% less here. You have something here again, something like 12, 13% power reduction in the evening hours. And if you combine the increase of load at those times here, like if you look at that difference, that's around 30%. And it means that at some times during the day, the load can be modified by up to 30% depending on the price signal that you have. And this is showing quite some potential. And this is measured just by looking at the manual response of the customers based on price signals. Now assume you don't have only manual response, but you might have automated response to price signals. Then you could expect even more flexibility than what you can see here. And so this shows quite some potential. This is much more than was seen previously in other scenarios, where they only looked at the load shifting that was seen over a certain time period in the total load during the day. And they did not, like in the other scenarios, the other projects, the other tests or field tests, they did not make such very systematic measurements. Like this was done by a PhD student at the group of Wolf Fichtner, the EEP or IIP Institute. So we just see there is some potential for load shifting. And so this can be exploited. The question is how we could exploit that. And now my PhD student, Andreas Kamper, who's now working with Exeta on software for the spot markets in energy, in the energy area, he designed a nice scheme for decentralized load management and for a cascaded way of reducing the need for balancing power. And the major idea is that we have a large number of devices in the house, like washing machines, we have fridges, freezers, air conditioning, but they have different properties, like a fridge and a freezer and a heat pump, for example, can be controlled without explicit interference with the user. A washing machine, a dishwasher, and so on always need activity of a user to put the laundry into the washing machine or the dishes into the dishwasher, and then there's some period where the washing machine should operate or the dishwasher should operate. Nevertheless, there is a large number of appliances that are available. There is an increasing number of combined heat and power plants, which can provide power and heat. And also buffer storage, I did not put in here some, I could have put also some batteries in here, but so we could also have more batteries in there. And we have electric vehicles, hopefully even more increasing now that we have all these incentives for buying electric vehicles. And we have communication facilities. So this is what is there anyway. And now we should try to make best possible use of the degrees of freedom, of the flexibility potential that is there associated with this scenario. So we know that they can communicate if they are in some way intelligent. Let's assume that they can tell about their degrees of freedom. We can communicate using the DSL routers. Actually, the DSL routers most of the time are more or less idle, and they can easily provide more services than just the communication services. So to just have as an additional task to also manage the energy is not really unrealistic. Then there's the environment where we assume there is no balancing power. That means if there is a deviation or an imbalance in a certain group of devices, we must be able to balance, to reduce that imbalance inside that group. So there's no external balancing power. And so we have to coordinate internally using our internet DSL router or some small control units. We should respect the privacy of the people, certainly, so we don't want to use some external entity which will do all that. The devices have certain restrictions. We will look at those restrictions in a moment. And the overall production and consumption are fixed. We assume, for example, that, like if you look at a fridge, there is a certain amount of energy that is needed for keeping all the contents cool, and you can just shift the times at which you actually cool it down. But the amount of energy that is needed to keep it cool during a day is a rather fixed amount of energy. And what we can do then is to have short-term schedule changes. We can modify the times at which those devices operate and look at how much we can actually reduce imbalances that occur compared to a certain power schedule. And it should be done hopefully in an automated way without the need for external interference. Then it can be used by the balancing groups to actually reduce the need for balancing power. Like if you can make sure that you can have a stable or have a balanced system, a balance of demand and supply inside a balancing group, then you don't need external balancing power. That is the constraint here. We assume there will be no extra balancing power available. We have to even out everything internally, which currently is not done because there's no market for that. But this is just a technological scenario where we look at, can we do that? And so we need to have appropriate methods for that. And to show how this could be done, this is just a diagram which is a simplified view on a power schedule. Yeah, so this simplified view on the power schedule shows over time here the need for power in green, that's consumption, and this red bar is the level of supply. So this is here a completely balanced situation. Certainly in reality it will not look exactly like that, but this is just an abstracted view of that. And now assume you have a deficit in power. You notice that, there's not sufficient energy available, or like maybe it was the energy provided that is taken from some external sources, and then you have this controlled combined heat and power plant, which is used to actually get a level that is sufficient for that point in time. And now you get additional demand, and so you have to use more internal power generation. You use more combined heat and power plants to increase the amount of power that is generated. Then you have a balance again. So if you have these devices available, you can increase locally your power generation and you even out, like this was an imbalance. Here this was an imbalance, and now you can balance that out. If we have the opposite situation, you could say, okay, I can just turn off certain combined heat and power plants. Again, I have balanced it. Now the question is, can it also balance it out by modifying the demand? So I would like to modify it to balance it by using my appliances, for example. So I have a deficit in the balancing group. Here I have what is this? Here I have not really deficit. Here I have a deficit in demand. So I would have a surplus actually. So what I would like to have here, I would like to move more demand for a situation where I have more generation than demand, more supply than demand. So this is actually not a deficit in balancing groups, but I have a surplus in balancing group, and I need more supply, more demand in this time period. Now, what I indicated here is I have made a price for that period. Like before it was like that. I reduced that slightly, and this resulted in this modification that certain devices decide to move their power consumption from some later period to this time period which we are interested in the moment. Now this is not sufficient, so I reduced the price even further. And now more devices decide to move their power consumption to this time period, and all of a sudden it's too much. And we have another deviation, we have another imbalance. So again, this was the surplus. By the way, now it is certainly, this results in a deficit actually. This results in more demand than supply. And we have this avalanche effect. And now assume you would not just have manual response, where you would always assume that only part of the people will actually respond, so you can make an estimate how much of the demand actually will be moved. If you have automated systems, if you have agents controlling the use of those appliances, they will all go for the lowest price. And then you always will have avalanche effects. So just to have a price as an incentive to modify your power consumption will always lead to avalanche effects. And it's not a reasonable system to modify your power consumption in some stable way. Because you cannot control the number of devices which actually respond to that. Yeah, if they all respond, then you have another peak in demand or another imbalance at this time that you are interested in. So what we would like to get is we would like to reduce the imbalances. We certainly have to respect the restrictions of the devices. Restrictions of a fridge, for example, are that the temperature should not go down too much, should not go up too much. So there's a temperature corridor that should be maintained. That's the restriction of the operation of a fridge. And you would like to avoid new imbalances. So if we have this situation, now we would like to reduce the amount of energy that is used at this time period here, this initial time slot. Then we would like here, we would like to make sure that certain devices decide to move their energy consumptions to later periods. But then we have to make sure that at those later periods, we always also have an adjustment of the predicted or anticipated power generation, because we don't want to generate new imbalances. So the task is to be able to delete this very short-term imbalance and then also make sure that the needed power at later times, because we said that the total power demand is fixed. If we move power demand away from the first time slot, it goes to some later time slots, and then you need more power generation at those later time slots. And so now we have this situation here, and then certainly here still we have another imbalance. If we try to fill that, then in the same way as you can see here, if we move power demand from those other times to fill this part here, power generation at those later times has to go down again. Okay. So what we have seen is price signals alone are not suitable. Accurate control is difficult to realize, like precise control. And the restrictions of devices can also lead to new imbalances because they have to run at certain times. The price signals must be set in advance. This was what I told you, that the settlement of balancing power is done later on. So what we would like to have is coordination between the devices and plan consumption and production together. And if we create new imbalances, have them as late as possible. Make sure that in the at short time periods you can guarantee a balanced system. Now the idea is to build such a pool of devices. We integrate all the appliances in into some pool, device pool, where they can communicate either directly or over using the DSL routers, as you can see here. And so you have some virtual neighbor. This is the neighborhood, so they can communicate. The fridge can communicate with the combined heat and power plant, or with the washing machine, or with an electric vehicle. They can communicate. One certainly has to think about how to configure that, which devices should be in such a pool. Definitely would not be reasonable to have just only fridges in such a pool, but you should have a reasonable combination of different devices. So this is a design task. And those devices should know their current status. they should know how much power they need in the future, and they should know their restrictions or their, I could also say, their flexibility. They should know the flexibility that they can offer. They have to be able to communicate that. That's why we need that communication. Let's look at one of those devices, a typical device. Typical device could be a fridge. Like here we have the example of a fridge or of a freezer. And we assume that we have a temperature, like certainly there we have a temperature corridor that should be, that shows how we can operate that. So if the temperature goes or is too high here, is at the upper limit, the fridge has to cool down the content or the interior until the temperature has the lowest point, and then it will take some time before the temperature is up again. Then you again need to use the fridge for cooling it down. By the way, just by observing those time periods here, you can notice how often people opened the door of a fridge and things like that. And from that you can see when they had, for example, their breakfast, their lunch, their dinner, and so on. So the parameters are the current temperature, the minimum temperature, maximum temperature. You have to know whether energy has been turned on or off, and whether temperature is changing, like is it currently going down or is it currently going up? This information has to be provided, and then certainly, like if you know energy consumption is turned on, and then you certainly know that the temperature is going down. And so not all these parameters have to be measured directly, but can be derived in some way. Now the question is how we can modify that. If you would attempt to modify that, just postpone the time for cooling down, then you would have this violation of the temperature constraints, which is not what you would like to get. Maybe in some situations you would do that, but normally we would like to satisfy or to respect those temperature constraints, and then this would not be what we would like to have. So what we would like to have, what we could do, is we could, for example, stop early cooling the temperature or cooling the fridge down. Then we have an earlier point in time where we have to start again here. We would have an earlier point in time we would have to start cooling down again. And but you see the power schedule here is completely different from the power schedule, certainly there where it's incorrect, but also from the standard power schedule. So even with a fridge, you have a certain degree of flexibility that you can use. Just shift the demand slightly. So that's the type of degree of freedom that we would like to observe. And obviously for a fridge, we can calculate always what the degree of freedom is for moving or for modifying the times at which you use the fridge for cooling the temperature down. So this is independent of whether there is some external user who is actually using that fridge. So the idea is that all the devices know about their energy usage. They would like to cover their energy usage. So assume that there is a certain device like a fridge would like to use energy at a certain time. Then it needs a partner, a combined heat and power plant, for example, to generate energy for that period of time. So they could just communicate locally with each other that if one device needs extra power, another device has to provide the power. Looks rather complex, so if you have a combined heat and power plant which has to run at a certain time, maybe to generate hot water, then you need all kinds of other devices which actually would consume the power that is generated at that time. And in this way, you could have all kinds of changes in your system, and all these changes could be negotiated between the elements in the pool. Okay, so this is just the general idea how that could operate. Now the question is how we can do that in the best possible way. So you could rely on just, I just let those devices talk to each other, and they will find some other device which will actually provide the power that is needed, but it may take some time. And we would like to make that in a more systematic way. And it means that if, like we had here, this situation where there is this one device which generates this area for or where power is generated, and now you need the appropriate combination of devices to fill that space. Now we would like to do that in the best possible way. So we have a certain area, a certain power generation area, available power, and this has to be used in the best possible way by some devices using their degrees of freedom. Now, degrees of freedom or their anticipated power consumption. So the fridge could have a certain power consumption which it can communicate, that here in this time frame from T0 to T4, there is always, whenever it's running at 144 watt, and it can run different amounts of time between 10, 12, or 6 or 8 minutes. Different possibilities. The combined heat and power plant might run at certain different times with different power, or generate different amounts of power. The other devices here might run at different time periods. And so you have information like that about time periods where devices can consume or generate power. And you have certain flexibilities in that. So here it says 200 to 400 watt. And so you can adjust that even. And then you try to actually get the best possible way of filling this area. Now, you could try to fill it. No, it doesn't fit. So this is some kind of bin packing, or space filling, combinatorial problem. If it is adjustable, it is more simple. But if it's not adjustable, it's a discrete combinatorial problem, a difficult problem. Like this is one of these typical NP-complete problems. And now the question is, how can we optimize that? And the idea is to do that with an evolutionary algorithm. So the idea is that one device actually will ask all the others, tell me your degrees of freedom, tell me your anticipated power consumption. And now I will run an evolutionary algorithm, I will run an optimization algorithm to find out the best possible way of filling that free space there. And then I send back the result, and you get these adjusted power schedules back. And so it's only one component which will actually optimize. It's collecting all, for example, the combined heat and power plant could do that, could collect all the information from the different devices. It has all kinds of information, and then it will run an optimization algorithm and will tell them later on how they should modify their power schedules. And in this way, we can prevent some unwanted effects of self-organization, which sometimes are not really predictable. Here we have a very predictable way of doing that, and any device could initiate such an optimization round. And we will see how that can be done with an evolutionary algorithm after the break. Thank you for your attention. What's this?